Kyle Whittingham is being accused of some things in an On3 article we got to discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's your first time listening. Make sure you like and subscribe, and huge shout out to those of you who do make us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can download today. My name is JT Wistrcill. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On Cougars, Jake Hatch, who also does a great job with KSL Sports Radio covering the local scene in Utah. And we're going to talk a lot of Utah today, mostly a little thing on power ratings versus power rankings, Utah, BYU, but and also getting some Utah basketball stuff. But Jake, we have to start with a very interesting story that came out from On3 talking about, hey, how the first year of injury reports, or the availability reports, as they're technically called, have kind of gone over, because there was an interesting excerpt in an On3 article that you actually helped post today, earlier today on your account. He did not make the quote, guys. He did not make the quote, but Jake, it was a very interesting quote too. And it talks about, like, just there are people in the college sports world that don't love how Kyle Whittingham is handling his injury reports. In fact, the wording in the article is actually that he's lying and manipulating the reports, strong accusations. I can see where the frustration comes from those entities. How do you feel about it?
Well, okay, here's the thing is, I have read the Big 12 bylaws on injury reporting, and there seems to be a dichotomy here, JT, of whether it's going by the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. And I seem to be of the mind of a guy like Josh Newman, obviously covered the Utes for a long time, still doing it obviously on a part-time basis now for KSL.com. He made a very good point earlier today, speaking of Tuesday, that Kyle Whittingham, he's operating in the margins. While he may not be fully living up to what you consider to be the spirit of the law with these player availability reports, he's also not flagrantly running afoul of the reporting guidelines. So that's, I think, where the rub comes into all this. But the interesting part is, and I have an On3 subscription, so I read the entire article, and I'll read the quote straight up here. This comes from VSIN host Jonathan Von Tobel. He called it Whittingham's antics, quote, outright manipulative. He says Whittingham has done it multiple times this year. If you're actually taking the sanctity, which is an incredible word in and of itself, of these availability reports that you as a conference have installed, you should take this more seriously. There should be some sort of repercussion. He's outright lying and manipulating reports. That's ridiculous, unquote. That comes from a Vegas sports, I think it's Insider Network. It's a betting platform down there in Vegas. They've got a radio network alongside that. And those are strong words. That's not coming from a anonymous source, I should say, because there's other anonymous P5ADs that are quoted in this story. That one's got a name associated with. That's somebody willing to go on the record and call Kyle Whittingham out.
Yeah, and I understand why there is the frustration with Whittingham because of how he has handled these injury reports. And you said it, Jake. He's technically been okay. It's on the line. It's like, well, Devon Dampier did play. We always knew he was going to play, he says. But then if you come out in the postgame right after and tell me about how hurt he is, it feels like it should have been probable, right? Like, the definition of probable, according to the Big 12, is 75%. Like, you just can't convince me in one that something happened to Dampier that you wouldn't have had to rule him out. Should have been game time decision. There's just been a lot of things with these injury reports. And Dampier is actually not on this week, so I'll talk about that in a moment. But I understand where the frustration is. Lying is a little far, but I understand. If the Big 12 would have fined Kyle Whittingham by now, I think they totally wouldn't have been in lines for that, because week after week, then some of the injury reports are starting to mirror Utah's now, but especially early on, Utah was kind of the exception that was doing their own thing, and I did think it was a bad look.
Okay, so I will also quote from this story because it's been out long enough now. I feel like I can quote from it, and I'll get right to it. So it talks about Devon Dampier's status this past Saturday, and Stormy Buonantony, who's the ESPN silent reporter who worked last week's game, she says in the story, so it said Utah starting quarterback Devon Dampier progressed from, quote, questionable on Wednesday's availability report to probable on Friday before being removed from the final report 90 minutes before Saturday's kickoff, aka the game day availability point. Stormy is quoted by saying this: what does that lead you to believe? Devon Dampier is going to play? No. It's very disingenuous in the sense that Dampier was available only as an emergency backup to freshman Bird Ficklin. So the point there, JT, is really the one thing that Kyle Whittingham may have been running afoul in terms of the overall written parameters is that if, as he said, a guy like Devon Dampier was a game time decision, because he's used that term multiple times in talking about him, he should have been on that report as a game time decision on the game day report. Outside of that, he's done nothing, from what I understand, having read these bylaws, that run completely afoul of the Big 12's reporting parameters. And I think it's also notable that Scott Draper, who is the competition football competition officer for the Big 12 Conference, declined to comment for this story. So there is nuance to all of this, JT, but that's very interesting to have two people, I said, Jonathan Von Tobel and Stormy Buonantony, who worked the game last Saturday. They have both essentially called Utah and Kyle Whittingham out for this.
Yeah, and Utah's has some fun history with the TV broadcast as it relates to revealing guys. Was it Bryson Barnes 2 years ago, like a Friday at Washington State?
And he got who is it? Who's got AM 570 Sports? Petros Papadakis called him out and roasted him for it, saying it was he lied straight up to us essentially about the availability. So the history is there for Kyle Whittingham, but I also at the same time, JT, this is how Kyle's operated for literally years now. So are we expecting anything different?
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be willing to sit around after one of these media sessions and explain his reasoning, just like he wanted to do that with his analytics this past week after the Utah BYU game a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I don't love how Witt's handling this. I wish there was a little more forthcomingness, but as you said, Jake, he's technically barely within those rules, with some maybe minor exceptions where the Big 12 could have stepped in. But there's no Devon Dampier controversy this week. He's not on the injury report. I'm surprised about that, based on just where it sounded like he was last week, where Witt's even willing to acknowledge a question about if he will play on the Monday press conference. Of course, ends up going and not seeing the field, but was available, what they said, to not even on the report this week. I am surprised. Merriweather questionable, Vakalaki and Taulonga are doubtful. Outside of that, no one else on here. So Dampier's going to play, but as you kind of said, Jake, too, I have no idea if that means he's going to actually be the guy for the Utah Utes. He just might be the emergency QB again. That's all we know.
That's the point right there, JT, that you nailed it. We know that he is supposed to, if he's not on this report, he's expected to be available, but in what capacity?
Yeah.
That is the question that remains. And that, I think that is what is going to irk other fan bases. And I know that the fan base that I seem to represent, BYU, it's going to irk them to no end that it seems like Kyle Whittingham's messing with this availability report again.
Yeah, he's done it a lot here. And as for the guys who are on it, though, as we mentioned, like Merriweather, questionable. I wish it had worked with Tobias Merriweather so far. It's not a massive loss, but hopefully he is able to get out there. And my heart breaks to see Taulonga on there. I love that dude. He's been such a fun story. You feel the same way, Jake?
Well, the new Rhino position has been revolutionized by this 5'11", 300-pound tight end, man. I love me Semi Taulonga, and I don't know what happened to him, but I'm hoping that he's not out long term, because they already lost Hunter Andrews at that position, and that Rhino position, which by the way is an incredible name because it's just a perfect fit for what that position does on the football field for the Utes. Losing guys like Semi Taulonga and before that Hunter Andrews, that leads you to think, okay, if that is as critical a role as it's going to be, who's going to step up next in that instance?
Yeah, that's what's really important, is who steps up there. And at the same time, you could say the same thing about defensive tackle. Yeah. If you don't have Vakalaki, I mean, Aliki Vaimahi's been very good, but Jonah Lae at times, especially against BYU, he got thrown off the ball in some of those short yardage situations. You're dealing with a lot of freshmen after that. Cincinnati runs the ball really well. I know Evan Pryor, their star back, is out, but that's a big blow for this defensive tackle group, Jake.
We have watched a guy like Bear Bachmeier carve up the interior of Utah's defensive line, but Brendan Sorsby is just as good, it feels like, running the football in the trenches as well. So I only pull that reference not to obviously put bad memories in people's minds, but I'm just using this as a reference point. Brendan Sorsby is a very, very capable runner in his own right. And if Utah's interior defensive line can't hold up, it is going to be a really tough proposition for Utah.
It is going to be an incredibly tough proposition, but it's also going to be tough if you are trotting out a true freshman QB again against an even better team, a team that's just, well, a lot better than we're going to see than what happened with Colorado this last week. So is Utah ready for the challenge coming up with Cincinnati, regardless of who is at quarterback, and just how good is this Utah team? That's what we're going to discuss in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game and want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. The Jazz are back, whatever your NBA team is. We got tons of games going on across the association. And how about college football? The Utah Utes, 10.5-point favorites with college game day coming to town. I'm a little surprised by that. I don't know if I would take the over on that, just especially not knowing the QB situation. We'll wait and see what it is later in the week. But that number is very interesting when you get a top 20 team coming into your house and you're the team that is the lower ranked one, 10-point favorite. That's something. So however you're feeling, you can head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers 300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jake Hatch, are you surprised that Utah is favored in double figures over a top 20 Bearcats team?
Mildly, but at the same time, when you don't have a star running back like Evan Pryor, I think that they're looking at this. It's Cincinnati traveling across the country late night, Saturday night, and based on what Utah showed against Colorado, why would you expect anything less? They ran for, I think it was second all time, 400 and whatever 40 yards they had against the Buffaloes this past week. I think the people in Vegas, people setting these betting lines, are just looking at Utah thinking, okay, maybe just maybe Utah's kind of rounded right into form here. And Cincinnati, while they are ranked in the top 20, they are still susceptible to going to Rice Eccles and being rattled, because you and I both know that's a very, very difficult place to play.
It's a very difficult place to play, and Cincinnati's a really good team. They are one of the best stories in the Big 12. Scott Satterfield has officially saved his job, but there's a difference between being a really good Big 12 team and being a true contender capable of going into a Utah in a normal year, not a last year, but a normal year, and winning in Rice Eccles Stadium. That's something that's really hard to do, and I think it's fair to question if the Cincinnati team is up for that. But the question also is for Utah is, can they keep winning with Bird Ficklin? I think Utah can win this game with Bird Ficklin, Jake, but I'm excited about Bird's future. The present for Bird, his passing woes at times do make me a little nervous. He made some nice plays and nice throws at times, but those lows can lead to turnovers against better defenses. So I think Utah can win either way, but if it is Bird, I'm going to be a little nervous because Cincinnati's defense has made some nice plays on the season.
He's going to have to improve on his sub 50% completion percentage. There's zero doubt about that. But the one thing I have been uber impressed with Bird is he has got an arm that can he's got a nice hose. To probably use the best expression. He can sling the ball all over the field. Now the accuracy needs to come along. So that'll be the one thing he'll need to show progress with. But the other thing on this game, JT, is Utah, if they want to stay in the race for the Big 12 title game, this is a must win for Utah. You cannot drop 3 games to consider to be the top 3 teams in the league right now and think you're anywhere in that realm. You've already lost 3 conference games at that point. You fall out of this race. So I'm not saying it's a must win. It's you don't win, you're out of the race. You're just looking at a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you lose to BYU, every game's a must-win. It was already even your second conference loss in a way. Even going into the BYU game, I said that's a must-win, not just for it's your rival, but the standpoint of if you lose, you don't control your destiny. You need help in order to get in, and even if Utah wins here, they still need some other things to go their way, which is concerning, Jake.
It is concerning because here's the thing. This race, trust me, watching it unfold last year, the crazy thing is I'll use this as an example. BYU would have played in Arlington, JT, had they beat Kansas and lost to Houston last year.
That's insane.
That's the insane part about this is depending on who you lose to and when you lose to them, that can affect who plays in the Big 12 title game in Arlington. That's what happened last year. Well, this race, it looks like it's kind of shaping up to be one of those situations where we could have a 3 or 4-way tie if things play out the way some people expect it to. And it really will kind of depend on who you played, who you beat along the way, and essentially when you beat them, because that strength of record, it's one of those key tiebreakers that in BYU's case cost them a season ago. And to Utah's case this year, you cannot afford to essentially be 2 games back of the other 3 teams who are leading the race right now and expect to stay in the mix.
Yeah, it's really interesting when we talk about this Utah team too, because we knew by the time we got to the end of last year, BYU is clearly the second best team in the Big 12 to me, right? Arizona State got the head-to-head win, but with how good BYU was, like they were right there and they should have had the opportunity to play in the Big 12 title game. Utah has lost their head-to-heads to a couple of these teams, but still a pretty dang good team, Jake. In fact, some people in their power ratings have Utah over a BYU. Josh Pate, who does, he was CBS Sports. Now I think he's just independent with a bunch of other networks. And then you get the other beat writer at CBS Sports, whose name I'm blanking on, Jake.
Tom Fornelli has Utah 11 in his power rankings versus 15 for BYU.
I got to be honest. I'll give the numbers why in a moment. I can see why they're going there. Now, there's a difference between power ratings and power rankings. You have to put BYU over Utah in a power ranking. They beat them head to head. That has to matter. But there are some interesting numbers and things that might point towards a Utah Utes team if you want to say, hey, I actually do think Utah is better if they were to see him again to get a win. There's some numbers where I feel like I could see how they get there, Jake. What do you make of some people having Utah higher in a power rating, not a power ranking?
Well, and here's the thing is these power ratings are essentially week to week. And let's be honest, look at what Utah did to Colorado. That was about as dominant a Big 12 performance in terms of Big 12 versus Big 12 this season as we've seen. And it was over at halftime, JT. I produced the show for the KSL Sports Zone, our post-game show, and I legitimately texted Christian and Alex, who host the show, and said, hey, you want to start this thing at halftime? Because it was that thorough a beating. It was over. And that you want to talk about power ratings. That's why Utah, in many respects, is being rated higher than BYU. BYU had a very impressive win over Iowa State, like to do what they did and come back. But the ratings, because you fell behind and had to rally back, that's where it cost you. Because Utah, they got off to a hot start and never relented against the Buffaloes. And that's a massive credit to Utah because they did not allow Colorado to get off the deck. When you have Deion Sanders saying it was the worst beating he received since his mom whooped him as a kid. It's pretty impressive what Utah did. So I can't say that BYU should be rated higher versus ranked higher because you're right. Rankings are one thing, ratings are different. And based on the performances of this past week, as they are a week-to-week metric, Utah is the higher rated team, I would imagine.
95-17. Any guess what that number means?
Ooh, is that the score line? I don't know. What am I missing here?
Utah's last two conference home games, what they've outscored their opponents by, because Arizona State didn't have Levitt and it got out of hand quickly. And the Buffs one was even worse. So it's weird. This Utah team, like their scoring margin is top 5 in the country. They're plus 20, but it's the two good teams that they've played, the really good teams, because they've played some, like Arizona State's defense is actually decent. We saw what they did against a Texas Tech, and then all of a sudden they come to Utah, though, and they had nothing working for them. So it's just weird, this Utah team, that they failed to get over the hump in some of these big games. Now they played Tech closer than the score indicated. Obviously, the BYU game was great back and forth. Utah ended up outgaining the Cougars. But to you, Jake, what's holding this Utah team back right now? And I know they're playing really well right now, and they'll have a chance to take another step. But why don't you feel like a Utah is in the driver's seat in this conference and instead sitting in a position where they don't control their own destiny?
Here's the thing. They allowed Will Hammond to go off in the Texas Tech game, and it was a game in the fourth quarter. And just like the BYU game, is game in the fourth quarter, finishing. That was a big thing that Utah struggled with a season ago. Trust me, a lot of your listeners and viewers probably don't understand my background, but I watch BYU and Utah just as much as the other of doing what I do in sports radio here in Salt Lake City. I watch every Utah game and I watch them intently. And the one thing that's kind of been a hallmark of the past season and a half, especially going back to 2024, is Utah will find themselves in a battle for 3.5 quarters, but then it's that final 10, 15 minutes of these games where things go south on them. They have to learn how to finish football games. If they refigure out or learn again how to finish football games, guess what? They're going to be right back in the driver's seat in terms of their chances for playing for Big 12 glory. But until that happens, you've got a season and a half plus worth of evidence that Utah needs to get back to learning how to finish football games.
They do. And I think they will finish the game against Cincinnati this week. I at 27-20, I'm taking the Utah Utes right now. I think Utah, as we write here, power ranking wise, I think if you were to say, hey, JT, what's Utah right now? I'd say they're the third best team in the Big 12 because I'm still giving the nod to BYU head to head. Like if Utah were to get another shot at the Cougars, I'd love that. But I have BYU, or I have Utah, third in the Big 12 right now. Where would you have them, Jake?
Well, here's the thing. It's 3 or 4, and it really depends on this weekend's results because it's Cincinnati and Utah in my mind, it's Tech, BYU, and then I think it's a tie for third right now in my mind with the Utes and the Bearcats. And really the results of this game will push one into the third spot and push the other one maybe down to 4 or 5. The race at the top of the Big 12, there's a lot of good teams, and Utah got a fine football team. And the nice part is they have an offense to match a defense that's routinely been very, very good. Couldn't say that a season ago. The offense failed miserably in helping this Utah defense out a year ago. So the nice part is it feels like you've got a complete football program. And as I said, the one thing that Utah's now got to do is they got to prove they can play a full 60 minutes and finish off some of these games against top tier opposition.
They do. They got to figure it out. How about Houston this year, by the way? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Houston, here's the thing. I've got to have them in the mix as well because they went to Arizona State. And I know that Sam Leavitt left, and it seems like Sam Leavitt's this talisman. If he plays, Arizona State's like impossible to beat. But if he's out, they're capable of getting just absolutely run over because they proved that at Utah. But the thing is, I think Houston, they're a very, very good team. I always believed that they would get it going with Willie Fritz as their head coach. He has proven that year 2 or 3, wherever he's gone, they seem to kind of have this rise in terms of being a force in the league, and we're seeing that already. The nice part is Houston is going to obviously add to this Big 12 race, and that's a good thing for this league because the more high-powered teams you have, the nation has to pay more attention to the league, which is obviously going to benefit them in terms of combating the narratives of the Big Ten and the SEC.
Totally agree. College game day coming to town this week too. A big spotlight and a big opportunity for the Big 12. And normally I'm used to talk about Houston. I'm thinking college basketball season. Well, yeah, on the corner. It's almost here. How are the Utah Utes going to be this year? And how is it going to go when they do see a BYU eventually? That's what we're going to talk about in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved with Mazda today. The Runnin' Utes are almost back, and Jake, I have no idea how this season is going to go. I loved the Alex Jensen hire. It's a fun roster. You got some talented players on it, but can it all come together? That's always the question in the transfer portal era. There's even more turnover on the basketball court in the transfer portal era from one year to the next than there is on a football field. I mean, there's one guy back on this roster from last year, if I'm correct. I think it's only Keanu Dawes. I think that is it. And then everyone else is different. So I think this is going to be a lower middle of the pack Big 12 team this year. I don't think they will be the worst team in the conference. I think they will take some positive steps, even though they're actually a little better than we thought they would be last year. But what are you expecting out of this Utah men's basketball program at 25 and 26?
The biggest thing for Utah this season, JT, to prove is that they are going to be a team. And you're right. The fact that you've kind of got this roster you've put together via the transfer portal and some recruiting and the like, Alex has got to be able to get all these guys on the same page and get them playing as a cohesive unit. That may take some time. And the nice part is the non-conference slate for Utah, it's relatively manageable. You open up against San Jose State, then you got Weber. You've got games in there where you can try out different lineups and the like. And the hope is that he has a nice rotation about whether it's 7, 8, 9 guys that he knows, hey, these are my guys, and they play as a unit. That will be the hallmark, I think, of this first year for Alex Jensen. And also, I guess on the flip side, if it doesn't happen, you're going to blow it back up and go back out in the portal again and try and get it right in year 2. That's kind of the give and take of this era of college basketball, because you're right. There's a whole lot of turnover, and Utah is right in the mix.
They are. Is there a reason the Big 12 is doing they did a preseason poll, by the way, for basketball and not football? I think if you're just going to do away with one, you should do away with both. That is weird to me.
I agree. I really just do think it was like a football perception thing because they didn't like the fact that the team that was picked dead last won the league a season ago. I think they kind of looked like a black eye on the league, but in some ways it was actually pretty cool to show the upward mobility of the football. But you're right. If you're going to do one, why are you not doing the other? That's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it's just a bad look. And I thought that was such a cool rallying cry for an Arizona State last year. So I hope they bring it back eventually football, but we'll see. Utah picked 13th in this, as we said. It's just going to be a very interesting season. They already lost. I believe it's Faye, the center, already out for the season with a
Yes.
season ending injury too. So it's just awful that you already have something going in that direction for this team, Jake. I really don't know what it's all going to look like, but I'm excited to watch it play out. What were you going to say, my friend?
Well, I just wanted to. The biggest thing with this Utah basketball team is I want to see who becomes the alpha. Is it going to be Keanu Dodds? Like, because he is the lone returner on this team, and Keanu's a fantastic player. Trust me, I love watching him play, and he's got capability of being a dominant, like type A player for a program like Utah. But I am curious to see who else, if he is that guy who's the lead dog, who can go with him. Who is going to be the Robin to his Batman? That's also something we need to discover early on in this basketball season for the Utes, because if you don't have horses, this Big 12, man, it will carve you up and it'll just absolutely wreck you, because there are no nights off in this league. And I'm telling you, from top to bottom, it can be the 16th place team versus the number 1 team, and it feels like it's an absolute dogfight every single night.
Well, one of the teams that we know has some horses is the BYU Cougars. It's a pretty dang good roster, Jake. Do you think this team is capable of doing? I mean, I've seen some people say Final Four run, like even like a deep tournament run. Just like if you're a high seed, that's a successful season. Do you think BYU can do that?
That's what they're hoping. Here's the thing: AJ DeBonsa, who's BYU's star player, like he's number 1 rated recruit, all this stuff. He said it himself, JT. He said the floor. He said the floor is the Sweet 16 for BYU. Ooh. I don't need to remind anybody out there that BYU in the last since 45 years has been to exactly 3 Sweet 16s. One of those coming just a season ago. Before that, it was Danny Ainge as Player of the Year and Jimmer Fredette as Player of the Year, who got BYU to that level. They have never been to a Final Four. The thing is, BYU could do some absolutely historic things this season if it comes together, and the roster, it looks like it's very capable of doing that. And that's the exciting part if you're a Cougar fan looking at it on that side of it, is they've got Richie Saunders, who's the most improved player in the Big 12 a season ago, an all-conference honoree. He's back. Him and AJ are going to essentially be the 2 guys that the offense flows through, and their capability of taking over a game in any individual circumstance is going to be a nice thing for BYU to have, because going to the point where I talked about, Keanu Dawes, I think he's capable of being the guy for Utah, but there are nights he's going to be keyed on. He's going to have an off night. Who is the secondary player that's going to step up in that role for Utah? That's the question that needs to be answered. So that's why I believe BYU, yeah, they're capable of making this type of a run, but they got to go out there and prove it. And they have put together a non-conference slate, JT. Unlike Utah's, which is pretty dang manageable, BYU's bitten off a lot. And they're playing the likes of UConn out in Boston. They're playing Clemson in New York City. They're going to Orlando for their mid-season tournament event. Like, they are traveling all over the country, playing in the Delta Center, playing these neutral site games. They're going to be absolutely testing themselves against some of the best and brightest. And by the time they get to Big 12 play, I think we'll have a really, really good idea of BYU being either a pretender or what hopefully is a contender.
I can't wait to watch Danny Hurley pop a blood vessel and trying to figure out what his team's doing with BYU in a few weeks.
Okay, here's the thing. Danny Hurley, okay, Utah is obviously building something here. Why is Danny Hurley still at Arizona State? Like, that baffles me to no end. It just screams to me that Arizona State, they care about one thing, football, because basketball apparently is not a priority in Tempe.
Yeah. No, not at all right now. Speaking of football, I wanted to go back to that really quick. Jake, it was a bummer our game didn't get College Game Day, but as someone who's covered game day before, coming to a Utah, of course, and eventually it will, we both know it will go to BYU with how that program's on the rise. What do you think this means for Utah to get game day?
It's a mark of respect. Now, I also will add the caveat that I think ESPN is sick of getting hit over the head by literally everybody outside of the SEC saying, see, you're in bed with the SEC. Stop it. And I think they legitimately are kind of woken up in a way, and this may sound harsh, but have said, okay, fine, have Cincinnati and Utah. It's not meant to be a dig at Utah by any means, but it's a top 25 matchup. And I think, like I said, ESPN's sick of everybody telling them, hey, we know what you're all about. You're in bed with the SEC, and they're finally saying, okay, we're sick of getting hit over the head, so have this game.
Yeah, and then you have Reese Davis mentioning that he might be buying some tortillas for a trip down to Lubbock, potentially.
What could that be? No, we'll see what happens. I think the biggest thing for that to happen for a Lubbock game with BYU and Texas Tech down there in West Texas, Tech's got to handle their business this weekend against Kansas State, because if they lose, it takes a lot of the shine off what could be a top 10 matchup between the Cougars and the Red Raiders.
Yeah, with the way that some of these SEC teams have beaten up on each other, it's definitely the case. I can't wait to see next week where BYU is in the rankings as well, too. I think BYU, Georgia Tech, like how are they valued by this committee? It's going to be really interesting to see. Jake, I'll get you out of here on this one because I just got to ask you, man, how does BYU keep doing this? Some of these wins, the way the Iowa State one goes out, like that's what Utah needs to do. How does BYU keep finding a way to win? Because that is what has impressed me most about this Cougars team is the result. They have a really talented team, but like the ability to avoid that stumble when you haven't played your best is a testament to, I also would say, just Coach Satake is fantastic.
You mentioned the word that I was going to use, resolve. They believe no matter what's happened, JT, they're like, okay, great. We're going to win this football game. There is a baked in feeling with this football program, speaking of BYU right now, that they just believe no matter what the circumstances are, if they're down by 40, I'm sure in their heart of hearts, like, oh, it might be tough, but let's go out there and let's get to work. They believe that they can win no matter what the circumstances may be. And that's a credit to Kalani Sitake and his coaching staff, Jay Hill, Aaron Roderick. They've instilled in these guys that you are a good football program. You don't win 19 of your last 21 games without that resolve. And I think that's the perfect word you use, JT. It's absolutely all about the fact that they have this internal belief, I'm talking across the board, that no matter what the circumstances are, they're going to grind out a win.
I tell you what, man, this isn't me coming from a Utah fan standpoint, but if I was some jobs that are open right now, I know we've heard the UCLA rumors with Satake. Like I would want Kalani Sitake to coach my program. I think we'd have to take something really good for Satake to leave. But if I was a team, I think C's done a fantastic job. Obviously, Jay Hill's been amazing too. Roderick's had a good year too. I know after people were frustrated last year, I'd be trying to get Satake. So I think that BYU's got something going there. He deserves a ton of credit for what they have been able to amass. And it's going to be an interesting season to see how it goes the rest of the way for BYU. And if people want to keep up on the Cougars, where do they need to head over to, Jake Hatch?
It shouldn't be very hard to find, but search out Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts, also available on YouTube. And if you want to chop it up with me on social media, reach out to me, Jacob C. Hatch on X, aka Twitter, or search out the show Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter as well.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely. Anytime, my man.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back tomorrow getting you guys ready for Utah versus Cincinnati. Dampier's not on the report, but is he actually going to start? We're breaking it down on tomorrow's show.